The Paracave Podcast, proudly brought to you by major sponsor Jack's Pale Ale, exclusively available at Parramatta Leisure Club, Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty, BTZD Clothing, and the official media partner of the Paracave Podcast, the Parramatta Times. And yes, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. Troy Warner here, and it is back to the interview-based podcast series with a former player. And this week's former player, wow, what a legend of the game. He has played for the Melbourne Storm, the West Tigers, the Brisbane Broncos and the New Zealand Warriors, and has also represented the New Zealand Kiwis on 51 times. Can you believe that? 51 times. Has won a World Cup with the New Zealand Kiwis in 2008. And look, if you cannot guess who that is by now, of course I'm talking about the one, the only, Mr Adam Blair. What a great career Adam had at all those clubs and representing the New Zealand Kiwis and also the Maoris as well in a couple of appearances as well. So what a great career. To have 331 games in the NRL is a massive achievement. One more than Nathan Hindmarsh, my favourite Parramatta Eels player. But 51 appearances for the New Zealand Kiwis. I think that is right up there as the most or the second most appearances. I'll just double check that one. And yes, I was correct. It is the second most Kiwi Test appearances in history. Ruben Wiki sits at number one with 55, but Adam Blair 51. So that is an amazing international career. And look, a great bloke, does great things for New Zealand Rugby League, as he will chat about in the podcast, and also does a podcast as well himself. So we talk about that one a little bit as well. So look, I'm going to split this one up in two parts as well. I think you guys, the listeners, are enjoying the split-up versions of the podcast. It is going pretty well that way. I have got some great feedback by doing it that way. So this is the first part. The second part will come out either a day later or the 2 days later. So just to break it up, give you an opportunity to listen to this one. So once again, thank you very much, Adam, for coming onto the podcast and having a chat. It was recorded it was in October, I think it was, so a few months ago now, and I'm only just releasing it now. So, but thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with in the future. I believe you have a new endeavour happening next season. So, anyway, listeners, I hope you enjoy part one of the chat I had with Mr. Adam Blair.
Welcome to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. And now over to your host, Troy Warner, broadcasting live from the world-famous Paracave.
And today on the podcast, got another very special guest, and one that I watch play in the NRL. And look, he has played 331 first-grade games, so he's part of the 300 game club. Also played 51 tests for New Zealand as well, which is an amazing stat. And is also a co-host of another podcast, a League of Our Own podcast with former guest Goran Paladin. Welcome to the Paracave Podcast, Mr. Adam Blair.
Thank you very much, brother. Thanks for having me. Like you and I, brother, just spreading the game of rugby league.
That's it, mate. That's it. The greatest game of all.
Definitely.
That's it. Well, we'll go back to the start. Growing up in New Zealand, what was life like for a young Adam Blair?
Good. Some of my best childhood memories was when I was a kid living in New Zealand. I'm from a small country town in the far north of New Zealand, which not many opportunities, to be honest. But some of the best times of my childhood growing up was growing up on a farm. We have a farm. My family lives on it. We took over that as a young family. My mum, my dad, and my brothers and sisters, and played rugby like every young New Zealand born person. You ask anyone, our first dream is always to play for the All Blacks. No matter what sport you play, you want to be an All Black, and that was the dream as a kid. Definitely was a dream to play for the All Blacks. And on that journey, you play every sort of games or sports to be able to accomplish those. Whoever knows that you're ever going to make it, but you've got to strive high and you've got to have a dream. And I thought at a very young age that I was always going to be an All Black, and I always wanted to be doing the haka in front of thousands of people, singing the anthem proud and standing there with my brothers on the world stage. Never got to those heights, but I got the next best thing was to obviously represent my country in rugby league. And, I didn't have the toughest upbringing. I had an upbringing where I learned a lot about myself as a young kid, and I moved away from home when I was 14, turning 15, and moved to Australia, which really opened up my eyes to the world at a really young age. When it all first started, it definitely was all about rugby union for me.
Before we get to your move to Australia, how then did rugby league come into your life?
Yeah, I just had a really good opportunity with obviously family friends that was a coach of a league team, and my brother and a few of my rugby mates went along just to run around and help out a mate and fill in for his team. And I think I played three games of league here in New Zealand on this side of the bridge, which was at the time Hibiscus Coast, where we played our first rugby league game. And then from there, out of the competition we played in, they picked a squad of, 23 to travel over to Australia. Okay. Played against the Penrith Panthers. I think we may have played against a Parramatta team as well.
Okay.
A long time ago, 2002. And then from there, obviously got seen over in Australia from the recruitment officer who is still running around today, Pete O'Sullivan, who come over to New Zealand, sold me the dream like they all do. Sold my mum, sold my granddad, sold me the dream, and I just went after it from there.
Nice. Well, having the dream of playing rugby union for New Zealand, did you follow rugby league at all? And did you have a team, or was it just favourite players? Or
I never followed rugby league. It was mostly only. Again, like when you live in New Zealand, if there's any New Zealand team sport playing in any big game, which in those times, 2002, the Warriors.
Yep.
I watched obviously Kiwi games because, as Kiwis, we always support our Kiwi teams that play in whatever sports, whether it be just boxing or anything in general. So never really watched league growing up as a kid. I watched obviously the Kiwi stuff, and my favourite player back then was Stephen Kearney, who also I get an opportunity to go alongside and be coached under for a long time in my rugby league career as well.
Yeah, nice. Well, you get spotted by Peter O'Sullivan and the Melbourne Storm, and then you just said there that you make your way over at 14, 15 years of age. That must have been daunting to move to another country altogether, wouldn't it, as a young kid?
Yeah, along with a couple of my contract decisions, which probably was the toughest decision to make, to leave home at a young age, and then moving into an unfamiliar country, a culture, a different culture change. But I guess the opportunity to explore what I thought then at a 14, 15, the world, and to see what else was out there around opportunities and what I could create for myself. Was more, I guess, the bigger picture thinking. I got signed for 2 years, I think maybe it could have been even 3. And I said to my mum and my brothers and sisters and my grandparents, it'll be back in 3 years' time. And the 3 years' time comes up, and I never wanted to leave the place. Loved it so much that, I learned a lot about the league when I first went over there. Obviously went to Wavell Heights, which is a league school in Queensland. And yeah, it was definitely some of the hardest times for me as a young kid, and not having, I guess, family and friends around to support me when times got tough. But really, I guess I look back on my time in my early years in in Queensland when I was signed for the Melbourne Storm. It was more around, I guess, what set me up for that was my upbringing with my parents, living on a farm, understanding how to look after myself. I do things for myself, and that's why I really was ready to go and move to another country, because I really knew how to, I guess, the first and foremost, make my bed properly, wash my clothes, fold my clothes, which are the basic things you should be taught it anyway. So I already knew how to do all of those stuff, so I thought I was ready to attack the world.
Did we heard just recently with Melbourne in the grand final how Craig Bellamy picks players and signs players more so on their personalities and the way that they are as a person. Was that the same case with yourself? I mean, you just mentioned making your bed and washing your clothes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, my first year down there, he just first come to the club. So then I wasn't signed by Craig Bellamy. I think it's obviously a lot different now, you know what I mean? But I was obviously, Peter O'Sullivan got me into a house up in Melbourne, which was the Melbourne Storm house back then in 2003. We went through a host family that supported us. They put us through schooling. And when the time was right, we moved down to Melbourne. I did Melbourne preseason 03, 04, 05, and then went down full-time end of 05. And I guess when you think about those times, especially with Craig Bellamy, his first year coming to the club, it was some of the toughest pre-seasons I've had in my life, especially being so young. Being on some army camps that, man, I thought I was going to ever play the game of rugby league after a couple of those army camps that I'd done. And I just thought, nah, man, if I can't get through these things, I'm never going to play rugby league. But you look on the bright side, I got through them, I worked hard. Back then, for him, it was mentally tough, resilient players and good defenders. That's all we needed to be.
Yep.
And whatever you needed to do, you went out and did it. Otherwise, you just get left behind. They've obviously built a really strong culture on work ethic, family, because no one really, when you go there, the club you don't really have your family around. It's just your immediate family if you've got kids and a partner. So they've really turned their place into a culture of, I guess, family first, but also looking after your mates. And just like you said, I guess, the person you are before the player. But back then it was his way or the highway. And if you didn't fit in, you'll find yourself out the door pretty quickly.
Did you have? Can you remember any good sprays that Craig gave during your time at the Storm? Like we see him in the coach's box.
I've had plenty of sprays in my time as a young kid on the training paddock, without a doubt. I think one of the big things when I was down there, and one of his pet hates were no shows, and hence mostly why I took a lot of people out after they passed the ball throughout my career, because I was traumatized from Craig Bellamy and his sprays that he gave me. So I think I was 16 when I took a dummy after a lot of times doing review and speaking about no shows. These are these are the things we don't want to do. This is our values. This is what we live by. If you take a show, you'll definitely know all about it. I took one show and there was a lot of colourful words said about it. And I was a 16-year-old kid. And I was at that time, I was, had obviously Cam Smith and them all down there. And, I had those boys stick up for me and say, hey, mate, come on. He's only 16 years old. And again, some more colourful words come out, and it was in polite words. We've just spoken about these things. This is not what we not do, and he's gone out there and done it in a nice way, But he said that colourfully. So I've had some pretty big sprays from Craig as a young kid, but hence sets me up for my my career. My foundations all laid down there, and like I just said, it's mostly why I did take out a lot of players. Fine.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, you're only listening to the coach there and don't want to get one of those other sprays. Those infamous army camps that you just mentioned just before, how hard are they?
Oh, I think they got them easier now.
Okay.
And I don't think too many clubs do too many army camps anymore. And I think the first one I went on, I would have been obviously 15 or maybe even just turning 16. And there was times I wanted to cry as a young kid. Not expecting that. They were sleepless nights. A lot of obviously, and I spoke earlier about mental toughness and resilience, and I think that's where he tried to push us to the limits and see what, I guess, back then you could, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of things that have changed now in our lives with everything that goes on in the world. But we were pushed to the limits, to breaking point, and if we come out of it, we are here today doing what we've done. If we didn't, they'll find yourself out of the place real quickly. So those camps were, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of hard work, mental resilience, all those things above. And then when you got through that, and I think I've done 2 more army camps after that, and nothing compared to the first one that I ever done. And everything after that was such a ride. Like, I really, and I think from then onwards, and when I knew I got through that as a 16-year-old, it really set me out for challenging myself through those tough times, because I knew if I could get through that army camp, I could get through pretty much anything when it come to, like, I guess, life and rugby league in general. And I really think that set my mental resilience up for my career, as you're always challenged every day through whatever mentally. And that was a big part of setting me up. And that's why I always tell people that my foundations were all learnt from down at Melbourne Storm.
Well, it obviously worked, because 2006, I think it was round 4 against the Tigers at Leichhardt Oval, you make your first grade debut for the Melbourne Storm. What was that experience like for you? Did you think first grade was everything that it was going to be like?
And I didn't even think I was going to play first grade at some stage there in my life. 2005 comes around, and I'm cruising around Brisbane thinking I'm going to have to look for a job just in case, you know what I mean? So started up my apprenticeship as an electrician. Dad was an electrician when we were kids, and I always loved going into the garage and playing around with all his toys and stuff like that, trying to make light things in the house and stuff like that. So I thought, well, man, I really enjoyed that as a kid. Why don't I just start something like that? So I started my apprenticeship, got very lucky at the back end of 2005 where the Melbourne Storm had a few injuries, and they asked myself to come down. At the time, they said, can you play front row? I was playing second row up in North Devils, and I said, me being me, I said, yeah, I know how to play front row. I never played front row in my life. At this stage, I'm only 2 years into my rugby league career, and especially still learning a lot about rugby league. So I said, yeah, I know how to play.
Yep.
So I come down for an opportunity over the Christmas break, and I stay on for a bit, and then I moved back to Queensland, and then they signed me back down and said, hey, we need you full time because an opportunity's come up to maybe debuting round 1. I think round 1 in that year, 06, could have been against the Warriors, which would have been a pretty cool experience. But the opportunity comes around and against the West Tigers, and I guess it's a dream. It is definitely a dream, but it's also, I guess, perseverance and sacrifice and the commitment that you have made since, I guess, a little kid, and then obviously leaving home at a young kid too. I think that's where it all comes back to. It's that not only at the end of the day, it was nice to play, make your debut, but I think you won you pull away all the strips, and it's also about, I guess, the journey that got you there, and to have my mum, my uncle there, support me on that journey, and such a great moment for myself and my family was absolutely outstanding. And yeah, like everyone has always said, it's a privilege to play one game.
Well, it was a pretty special year, 2006 for yourself, wasn't it? Melbourne made the grand final. Unfortunately, they lost to the Broncos, but you also make your New Zealand Kiwis debut, and you dreamt of playing for Rugby Union for New Zealand, but you made it in Rugby League for New Zealand. That must have been a special moment, that first test.
Yeah, outstanding. Things happened pretty quickly on the back of 2006, and I think I played 16 games that year, and not expecting to even be in consideration for the Kiwis, to be honest. I was just grateful that I have the opportunity to play along some legends of the club, and are now to this day, and to try and continue moving forward in the game of rugby league and keep representing the Melbourne Storm. And I guess the opportunity to play for New Zealand comes up. I get selected off the back of a grand final. Yes, we didn't win, but it's always nice on the back of a loss to go into a Kiwis camp when you're around the best of the best. And again, I think I was only 21 that year. Most probably took a lot of things for granted, I guess, even in the NRL space more so. But the opportunity to represent New Zealand and then be able to come home in front of my family 3 years after leaving, which happened so fast, was was so nice to be able to be on home soil, to do the haka, to sing the anthem, to be around my family and friends who all were riding me to hopefully be the next best thing coming out of the north up here in New Zealand. And I guess it was that moment where, I felt like I had made it. That I had done so much to get to where I am, that I did put our people up north on the map, and was a representation of, I guess, them as well when I stood there and got to represent the Kiwi. So a special moment definitely for myself and my family, and one that, I look back on, even when we're speaking about it, fond memories of it as well.
Yes, no doubt. We'll fast forward a couple of years to 2008, and the centenary test, that must have been pretty special to play in, of centenary of rugby league at the SCG. And I saw the other day on your socials you put up the question about, should we bring back the mid-year test?
Man.
When can we play it, and how can we do it? Because I'd love to see it back.
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up, mate. I was just going through my garage, and man, a lot of my stuff is still sitting in boxes and vacuum sack bags in my garage, and I'm thinking, man, I've got to just go back through here. And I saw this bag of jerseys, which I've had down there for a while. My kids are going through there now and wearing them, you know what I mean? They're wearing all my jerseys, and they wear them to trainings and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, surely they can't just wear any single jersey. Anyways, I go through it, and that one pops up, and I'm thinking, there's been so much talk, not only from us as former Kiwi players, but our players as is now, so desperate to be able to play more rugby league international space for the Kiwis. That we need to have more of these games. Where we fit it in, the only place we fit it in is how they used to have it during the year. And I know that it's not a big deal for the Australians because they play a lot of football.
Yep.
And as you just seen over the weekend, their junior kids are playing, their junior girls, women are playing, the Prime Minister's team's playing, and here everyone else is just still waiting around for international games. And until we can get more games, I think we'll all still be vocal, and I think that will be a big talking point over the Pacific Championships as well, especially in our camp, especially our players, because our players feel it. Our players want more rugby league. Our players deserve to play in those games. And like I said on some of my posts, is that they've never played in the Anzac. Some of these players have never played in the Anzac game. Some of these guys will never get to play there if it's never been put on for them. So I'm really passionate about bringing that back for our current players, because I feel like it's important, but it's also a big deal for New Zealand Rugby League.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's a great thing that they have on at the moment in NRL with the Anzac Day games, but as you just mentioned there, a lot of Kiwi players miss out, and, Anzac Day is Australia and New Zealand, so, it'd be great to see that one come back, that's for sure. And then later on in 2008, you win the World Cup with New Zealand, skippered by the great Nathan Kalis, one of my favourite ever Parramatta Eels players, and also one of the trainers that day, or in that campaign, was the great Hayden Knowles as well. He's been on the podcast as well. Is that the highlight of your career, the World Cup win for New Zealand?
No, I think. Like, when I think about it now, at my time playing, I wouldn't have said that was a highlight as a kid, because I was 22. Yeah, okay. Things were happening really quick, you know what I mean? I was grateful to be a part of these teams. Like, some of the players I was playing with were our legends of New Zealand. You mentioned it, Nate Kalis. I think David Kidwell was around there. There was and Benji Marshall. There was some outstanding legends of New Zealand playing in that game, and I think I was just a kid just enjoying my football, and I didn't really look at it as in it was something that I look back on and say that was one of the best moments or milestones of my career. I think there's been so many, and even so more so when you get older, as you understand what it is to be a footballer, and it's not all about the game. Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I think when I think about it in the moment, of course it was an absolutely outstanding result for us. But I was a kid just living the dream. living the dream. And I look back on it now, and I speak to people, and people say, "Man, like that was a game that that no one ever expected us to win, but when we won, it brought the country together. It brought the country together because we were backs against the wall. We should never have won that game up against the quality of what the Australians have, but the belief on that day to go out there and get a job done was absolutely outstanding."
When you got back to the Melbourne Storm, did you thank Billy Slater for that pass?
No.
Well, that just happens in a game.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you step on the field, and although they were all my mates at Clubland, you step on the field for your country, there is no mates. It's country versus country. Your mates are on your side. So, and then when you go back to Clubland, you're back as in club mates. No one talks about, what he did on the field or what he was like. You might get a couple of jokes from a couple of mates outside of that space, as in other teammates. But when you talk to someone like Cameron Smith or Billy Slater, it was never spoken about. It was it's done. You won the World Cup. You move forward. It's back to Clubland now.
Yeah. Nah, fair enough. Well, I mentioned Nathan Kalis there. Now, as a Para fan, big fan of his. What sort of a person was he as a leader on the field and off it?
I think when I think of, I guess, Nath, and as we're kids coming through, you know what I mean? So those guys are role models for us. They're legends. They're idols. And I think what they instilled in us in that week, alongside some of our other older guys, Stacey Jones was in there when I first started. Obviously, David Kidwell was there as well. Dave Farlongo, there was some, Brett Webb. There were some great people around us. So when Nate said something like anything, and you're a young fella, you just nod your head and say yes. You know what I mean? You never ever question what these guys have ever done in their game, especially when you're a young fella coming through. You do your thing, what you're told, and I just think they led from the front alongside Nate. They all led from the front. They instilled the belief in us and created an environment of belief that also represented ourselves out on the field at the highest of levels.
Yeah, he certainly did that. The NRL's youngest ever captain, I think, still to this day as well. We'll fast forward to 2009, and Melbourne have a great season and end up playing Parramatta in that grand final. What was that grand final like for yourself?
Did you say 09?
Yeah, 2009.
Yeah, again, I've been very spoiled over my time as a rugby league player, and I guess you look at the Penrith Panthers now and how many grand finals that they've played. I think I played in 06, injured 07, 08 I played obviously in 09. Very spoiled to be playing, that many grand finals, and as you would know, not everyone plays in a grand final or also even wins one. So a great opportunity to go out there and come up against a club that was running on an awesome streak to get into the finals, and alongside some of those guys that were finishing up at the end of those years. And we ran out on grand final day, and it was yellow. It was yellow, which for me gave me motivation. Gave me motivation because I felt like, and like always, Melbourne is just this little place in Melbourne that's surrounded by AFL and don't get much said about them, but just go about their work. And back in those days, everyone was saying, the Storm play a boring brand of football, but it was so consistent that they played so many grand finals in a row that everyone, a bit like the Penrith Panthers, they knew what they needed to do to win games, and they just knew how to execute it. And there were some ups and downs on those journeys. 06 obviously lost 7-1, 08 hiding from Manly, 09, and there's another final. And then we win that one, but it was an absolutely outstanding week. That's when I think they had the grand final breakfasts then.
Yeah.
And when you go down to the finals consistently, you understand the difference between weeks and the pressures and what you need to do and how you treat things. And I guess in 09, it was more so that knowing how good you were individually and as a team and how you could get a job done, they brought us confidence in what we could do on game day. And obviously I managed to jag a try in the grand final. I set up one for Billy and had the best time. And look back, those are some of the good memories, eh? Those are the memories that when you look back as you've gone through your career, you're like, yep, that one stood out for me. I played a big part in that game. And I think about that '08 World Cup. Like, I just felt like I was there because I was a good kid and I enjoyed
it.
Fun, you know what I mean? As you go through your career, you get a little bit older, a little bit wiser. You start to understand the game. You start to understand the pressures and what it takes to be a professional athlete at their highest level. And I felt like you can make your mark in the game, and I felt like that was one of the bigger years for myself as a footballer, but also just enjoying what I did and playing on the big stage.
Were you getting worried when Big Philly scored that 40 metre try?
I was on the bench and I was thinking, well, I don't know how long we had left, but the pressure started to turn. The pressure definitely started to turn. The momentum started switching over to Parramatta, and that was their try from one side of the field to the far corner. Yeah. And scored a try. And yeah, I guess like anything in grand finals there is always going to be pressure. There's always going to be moments. It's just who can stand up in those tough times. And yeah, definitely they felt like there was going to be some pressure and the game was getting a bit tighter. But again, like we always had, and it wasn't about being arrogant. We just knew what worked for us then and knew how to come over the top when times were tough, And I guess it comes back to, your preparation, your pre-seasons, the culture you're building and what your values are as a team and how you value that.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I thought maybe we could have come back and jagged that one, but it wasn't to be as soon as GI put that field goal over and got that 7-point difference. But the next year, the Melbourne Storm was stripped of those premierships, 07 and 09. Yep. Now, as a player, look, it's always a difficult, I guess, subject to talk about because as a fan, because you think, everyone's involved, everyone's a cheat, all this and that. But the more I look at it over time, I think, well, it's not the players' fault. I mean, you're not going to know how much each player is on and all that. So you guys just come together and play footy. So how difficult a time? What are your thoughts on that? Do you obviously still think that you're premiers for those years?
Well, I like every year you go through the same pre-seasons and you work just as hard. You know what I mean? And although, like you said, I don't know what the next person's on. I don't know what they're doing, and it's not about what they earn or how they go about their business. It's just that at the end of the day is that when you turn up to day one pre-season, you work hard as a group, and if they get caught, it's because obviously someone's doing the wrong thing. But who are we to know each other and why they're doing what they do? I guess that's why we have the salary cap now. I still believe that we put as much work as in every other club in the competition to try and win that game. And that's why we won the game, because we actually worked really hard in the off season. Yes, it was disappointing what happened and how it all come out, and the things that happened in 2010. It was much really the toughest year for the club and for some of the individuals as well. But at the end of the day, we all knew how hard we worked. Yes, obviously some people were getting payments, third-party payments that they shouldn't have been getting, which is each to their own back then, long time ago now. But we still worked our butts off in the preseason. The preseason never changed. We never just thought, because we know we're going to get caught down here somewhere, that the preseason is going to be a little bit easier. It was still the toughest preseason. We also played through the season for no points. That was just as difficult, because who said we had to turn up every day to train when we weren't playing for anything? But we made a commitment to ourselves and as a club that we were going to put our best foot forward every single day to go out there and represent, I guess, the Melbourne Storm, the fans at their highest level. And I think when they came through those tough times, it only made the club stronger. It only made players better and wanted even more because of what they went through. And I think if you don't go through those times, which you don't want to go through those times, but if you don't put yourself in a bit of adversity, you never know how to overcome it. And I thought alongside, I guess, each and every one of those people, the fans stayed connected, the club stayed connected, and we were all as one.
Now, you mentioned 2010 there, and that's obviously when the titles were stripped, but one famous game in 2010, and if people knew that I was talking to you, they'd say, well, you got to ask him about it. What did Glenn Stewart say to you in the Battle of Brookvale? How did that all erupt?
Yeah, I get that a lot. I get that a lot around the fight and what happened and what he said.
How you going, mate? Are you a Para Cave podcast listener?
I am, bro. Okay. It's a great podcast. Everyone tune in.
Go Para.
Hello, Paracave podcast listeners. My name is Shannon Cooney from Glenmore Park Realty and long-term sponsor of the Paracave podcast. If you're looking to sell your property or buy, or just curious to know what your property is worth in today's market, give me a call today on 0421 588 445.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Paracave Podcast. See you next time.